Hi, my name is Karen Holmes. I'm the founder and director of the World Peace Organization for the One World Government. Today is Juneteenth, June 19th, and yesterday was the federal holiday, the first time we're celebrating it as an official federal holiday, and I'm sure people enjoyed having the day off, even though they only had one day to prepare for it. But today is a really remarkable day because of changes that are occurring, positive changes. There has always been a resistance to change, and when you look at slavery and human rights violations, slavery has always been something that, well, I'm not going to say always, because I'd like to talk about that too. Slavery and human rights violations have to do with this act of revenge. Okay, now for a minute, I'm going to go back and I'm going to talk about something that we learned at our prayer circle about slavery. Okay, when we Americans have a different idea about slavery than they did in the olden days. Let's say there was a misunderstanding about slavery. When the British monarchs, or not just the British, the European monarchs, started to go around, they love jewels. They love jewels, and the more jewels that they could put on their crowns and their scepters and everything, they wore jewels. Basically, the more jewels they had and the heavier it was, they didn't mind having 15 pounds of jewels on their crown, because basically it was a sign of power and strength. So they had to get their jewels someplace, and that is they started to colonize places where jewels were abundant. And the thing of it is, there was a misunderstanding at the time when that happened, that threw everything off balance, where other countries don't necessarily have the same problem. So I wanted to clarify the misunderstanding. A long time ago in Africa, there were many tribes all over the place. I mean, the whole place. If you look at the number of languages that are spoken in Africa, in one country, there can be 200, 300 different languages that are spoken. In like the Democratic Republic of Congo, for example, they speak French because of the French colonization of, well, it wasn't so much France, it was Belgium who did the Democratic Republic of Congo. But what happened was, in those days, a long time ago, before the white people basically came in, slavery didn't have the same connotation. Okay, what happened was a tribe, the leader of a tribe, the chief, so to speak. I'm using the words that I don't know, the words that would be used in any particular language, of course. But the chief of the tribe would maintain his power base by, whenever a competitor, a powerful person would rise up, in competition, potential competition, he would sell that individual into another tribe, into slavery. It was almost, you could say, a badge of honor to be sold into another. It wasn't good, but it was almost a badge of honor to go, because that meant you were very powerful, and it meant that it kind of kept everybody at a certain level. Okay, when the kings and the queens of Europe basically started to colonize, they didn't understand that. They went in there and they said, okay, like in the Democratic Republic of Congo, Zaire, they called it at that time. The Congo River has like it's shaped like an arch. The first, next to the ocean, there is a stretch of river that's easy to traverse with boats, but then there's 100 miles of rapids, and they can't take boats. So what they had to do at the time, then there's the Congo River, that it stretches all the way over to the eastern part and comes down. Okay, so what they did was they needed people to be able to carry goods and their packs on their backs, walking 100 miles. They didn't have horses and they didn't have other things, so ways to travel and carry their goods, so they carried them on their backs. Imagine how much manpower it would take to take a group of people and all their goods and all the, into Africa, into that part of it. Okay, so into the part where they could also then get on boats again. Well, what happened was they went to the tribes, the chiefs of the tribes in that area, and they said, we need people to help us move this. And they said, well, I'll sell you 5 men. And so all of a sudden it was like slaves. Okay, we have slaves that are being sold. And the white people were going, why would these people be selling? This is what we got at our prayer circle. Why would they be selling? What kind of animals are they that would be selling their own people into slavery? And basically it was, these people are strong, these people are capable, these people are threats to me, so I'm going to sell them into slavery, like they had always done. And then they had the regular people. They maintained a sense of balance that way. I don't think there was that much competition because the land was so vast and they had their own tribal areas and things like that. They were able to maintain their land, maybe not so much the way the Native Americans were, but there was the same kind of Native American slavery possibly in the United States, and I'm not so sure about that. They were more if they were captured in battle. So it was not the same kind of thing. So here we had slavery coming about because of a misunderstanding. Now they had slaves in Rome, for example, but those were more like the people had a sense of power. The slaves there had a sense of power. I'm dealing with a past life issue now with a group of people where I was a slave, and I was a page, so to speak, a slave to a Roman senator. And when the man died, the senator died, there was a competition for who was going to be the next senator. Well, I was bought by a man a man's wife who wanted to be a senator, and instead he looked at me as the misunderstanding. It was like, I own you, I can throw you away. He had been a Roman general who had been out on the march, centurions or whatever. Like I said, the words don't fit very well, except I'm translating them into words that we use. Okay, so what happened was he was on the march and he looked at everybody underneath him as somebody under his foot. But I had power, I had slaves. So when he killed me, he lost any chance that there would be of being able to become a senator, because the emperor didn't want people who killed other people in his Senate. He wanted to turn over responsibility to for his job. So he was delegating responsibility, and he wanted people to assume responsibility. And if they were out killing people who he personally knew. So you see, as a slave, that I had a great deal of power, even with the emperor. He knew who I was. The senators knew who I was. I had power because I was assuming responsibility for doing the jobs that he had to delegate. I was more like a tutor than I was somebody like in America. We assume the people who picked cotton. Okay, so let's say that we had this big continuum of frequency between what a slave is. Okay, now back in America, so that misunderstanding was brought forward. So let's say that the slavers go to the Africans and say, we need 20 strong men to help us on our farms. Okay, so the chieftains would say, okay, I've got 20 strong men. I'm going to pocket the money and I'm going to sell you. Okay, they can have families. They can come and they can have families, so they can bring their family too. Okay, yeah, we have this. So the chiefs didn't necessarily want to sell their people into a slavery situation. They thought they were going to have more power for themselves, but also that those people were going to go off. They didn't think that they were going to become treated so badly. Okay, so that misunderstanding is this part of that big misunderstanding. Is part of this continuum of, let's say, we always have 3 different ways we can look at something where it benefits everyone, and that is where people are coming and they're paying off, let's say, a national debt. This is what's happening in Cuba. They need the embargo that had been put on them for a long time prevented them from having a cash flow, having a flow. So what they did was they trained their doctors and then sent them to, like indentured servants, to Venezuela. And Venezuela was basically paying for oil, possibly. Okay, see, it was like a win-win agreement that happened. So now we're looking now at this. When the Emancipation Proclamation came out, of course there was so much resistance, and that was because of the revenge. When you believe that you can put somebody down, okay, so the chiefs were putting these people down. Why are these people putting these people down? Okay, and then judging, we're going to judge them as being lower class people. And then if you can do that, then what you believe you can do is you can take what's theirs. Okay, we can take away their freedoms, we can take away their rights, we can take away everything. We can keep them, we provide them with clothes, and we can provide them, they have to make their own clothes or whatever. Okay, so see what I mean? And then it's like this idea of revenge. If you can put them down, you can judge them. And if you believe you can judge them, then you can believe you can take what's theirs. That's massacres. We can believe we can massacre them. Always that continuum of frequency with the 3 choices. We could massacre them. Think about the people who were judged and then hung, and then their property became the property of somebody else, and then they own them. You can own them, and then you can force them to drink out of their own, living on the wrong side of the tracks, and then they never would get up. And then what would happen is then you could deny them a voice. They, like in the Constitution at first, they were like 3/5 of a person. Their vote didn't qualify if they were even, I think, so I'm not an expert on this, but imagine they weren't even considered a full human. Because of that. And then that justifies putting them down. So this act of revenge led to racism, led to slavery, led to all these issues. This is slavery right here at lust, the sin of lust. These are 7 deadly sins. Now, the problem that we have right now is that this is what we're seeing in our organization, is that there are 2 power games that are based on weaving an illusion. This is where we are as a country right now. We're looking at these 2 power games which are based on the big lie. Slavery and genocide are the 2 power games. When these games stop working, the pendulum swings back to the midpoint, mostly, and then basically then there are 2 power games that keep going. So let's see, Juneteenth right now is saying, well, we're not going to put black people down anymore because it's not a good idea. We're losing people, we're going to lose to the Democrats if we do this. support this bill. It's I mean, after 160 since 1860, for heaven's sake. So let's not lose any more votes. But we're still going to try and get these. If the voter suppression laws are being shot down in the Supreme Court, basically we probably better go along with this idea. But the resistance associated with that was saying, what happens if but then you're slaves. What happens if you're a chieftain and the other tribes move in because you don't have as many people as you used to have anymore? And you cannot decimate your people and still have any power. Okay, so now this act of revenge is where we have been for a long time, thinking that the revenge works. Like I said, there's a problem with that, and that is nobody's in agreement. Say, if Donald Trump told the big lie to justify the insurrection, nobody was in agreement with that to happen, these lies. So he said, well, I've got 74 million people. I got to keep them so that when I become president again, I'm going to own these people. And then what happened was, what happens if they're going to prison for the insurrection? People, 200, 300 people going to prison because they did what the president asked them to do, and they're angry. So you see, it's all these power games, grabbing for power, people holding on to the power, and things like that. Now, this is the revenge in the Bible. It says, "Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord." 7 deadly sins go against universal law. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. So, in other words, you're not fighting somebody else. Donald Trump is not fighting the Democrats. He's fighting universal law. He cannot fight the universe and expect to win. And this is where we run into this. Okay, with revenge, Dante said there was the last wall of hell is revenge, and people in hell are in torment, right? So people there was a book that I read called King Leopold's Ghost. I don't remember who wrote the book. They talk about the people who made it into the central part of Africa, and they were on the rubber plantations. And they were taking all that rubber, and they were going to make wheels for their tires. They were going to transportation was no longer just by train or by buggy. They had wheels on their cars, and they needed a lot of rubber at that point in time. So at that point, the Industrial Revolution in England was really cranking up, and Germans and everybody were working very hard to develop an industry-based economy. Okay, so then they had in the book King Leopold's Ghost, they were talking about how they had killed people, how they enslaved them, and they were whipping them, and they were all the Belgians who had gone there to get all this rubber and diamonds and in coltan. Now Democratic Republic of Congo has coltan, which is used in cell phones. So are cell phones going to be the new rubber diamonds, blood diamonds? Okay, why is it being manufactured? Okay, so ask that question. Every time you look at your cell phone and how it's going, where does the coltan come from? The rare earth minerals. Is this something that is necessary for you to have? I don't have a cell phone. I won't use a cell phone. I was given a cell phone and I won't even use it. So I'm going to probably just donate it, which is really weird. Donate it to the thrift store, because let them use it or throw it away, send it back to Africa maybe. If the natural resources don't go to benefit the people, then it's time to come up with a more humane way to find things, humane technology, maybe crystals or something like that. I don't know. That's not my job. Okay, so anyway, that by getting revenge on the people, it created a sense of torment. They were watching all these people with children being whipped and being murdered, and children being sold into slavery. And it's one thing to consider people working class, it's another thing to have a slave class associated with this. They felt that they had been victimized. To rationalize that, they felt they had been victimized. So that was the last stage of the genocide that killed many, many, many people there. So that's where the genocide and the revenge came in, and this misunderstanding. Okay, so slavery is something that happens every day now. In fact, you could say some people, I'm technically speaking right now a slave. I have been held down for a long time, and I have been a slave for a long time. Not so much trafficked, but everything held so that I can't move, okay, until I give somebody what they want. And that's the thing about it, is that with revenge, what people want, this is also part of the torment, is that that with slavery, or with this, it's like in revenge, you want something, and the revenge, say, over here, nobody's in agreement with you having it. There isn't anybody here in agreement. But what happens is, this is where the slavery, where the revenge comes in, and then it's supposed to help you get what you want. The problem with it is that there's nobody here, and so the only thing they want is revenge. They got revenge, but they didn't get what they wanted over here, which was the combination. Let's say if you are Donald Trump, you hold people to you, or you push them away. I'm going to fire you, or I'm going to keep women towards me, for example. I'm going to keep the 73 million people, voters, or I'm going to push them away. There's no middle ground between there. So if you are telling a lie, the grand lie, to do this, there's nobody in agreement for you to do that, because presidents don't do that. You cannot get your life by getting revenge. So what's happening right now is that people are in torment. They're in crisis because they can't figure out why they didn't get what they wanted, and they got revenge, and it's like watching people dying. It's like watching people going through this hell, and they don't know how to solve the problem. So that's where we're coming in right now. This is the next step, is to how to get out of this crisis situation. Okay, our exit strategy for Iraq is the solution on how to end a genocide, how to end slavery, basically. The people like Donald Trump, you can tell he's working only for himself, because he's a fourth-row person. He, as people said, he believed in Putin, but not his own U.S. Intelligence. He's a fourth-row person. He's 180 degrees from where he thinks he is. Okay? So, exit strategy for Iraq. You figure this out for yourself. All the information is right here. And then what he's done is he holds people to them, and he pushes people away. You're fired. Okay? You're my students. If you don't like what I'm going to do, you're fired. You're my fixer. I'm going to fire you. I'm going to let you go to prison, okay, for doing what I asked you to do. Okay, so then what he wants is a combination between a voice. Twitter, social media has allowed him to have a remarkable voice of Fox News, okay, and then greed, so that he has been able to advertise his businesses. For example, he goes down to Mar-a-Lago, and he makes money from this. This is what he's doing. He's making money from what he's doing. This is an example. You can recognize the games that are being played when you see this pentacle of power. Then, now, like I said, but the Iraq War was the first George W. Bush created the first waves when you got revenge on Saddam Hussein. There were no weapons of mass destruction, and that collapsed the U.S. power base. The games continue on until an innocent person is sacrificed, crucified, like Jesus being crucified, then it collapsed the power of the Roman Empire. And then what happened is, so George Bush was the first one. Barack Obama wasn't able to overcome the effects of the Republicans, the pressure, and that went the second set of ripples around the circle. And then the third is Donald Trump with his maximum pressure campaign on his own people. Okay, so revenge. So we're looking at now, going back, not at Donald Trump, not at Barack Obama, but we're going back to George W. Bush and the Iraq War. And we're coming up with an exit strategy for Iraq that allows us, the United States, it's been swept under the rug. Most people young people don't even remember the Iraq War because it's over. They weren't paying attention or whatever. So what happens now is the Iraq War, the exit strategy for Iraq sets up a protocol for ending genocides and the revenge. So the first thing that we're doing is we're looking at revenge, how it works, why it doesn't work. We don't want people to be in torment. So we are going to say everybody's equal, and I've been working on my books associated with that, the Power series books. Where does true power come from? The government proposals and the books associated with this. I'm not going to talk about the books now. I'm going to talk about the stages of the exit strategy for Iraq. So the first one is the books. It's like the books of the Bible. It says, and universal law. The 7 principles of universal law are equality, liberty, freedom, compassion, abundance, capacity, and tolerance. And they flatten out the curve, so to speak. So if there is an understanding about where viruses come from, basically that flattens the curve. Okay, the whole idea is to flatten the curve and to make it so people can walk forward. If you flatten the curve with a virus, with a pandemic, the hospitals are not in code black all the time. You have people lined up out on the streets, and they're triaging them to who's going to die. Okay, that is a sense of torment, letting people die when you're a doctor or a nurse. Okay, so what you have to do is flatline the curve, and that's what we're doing with these 7 principles, is understanding where slavery came from, the misunderstanding related to slavery, the misunderstandings related to the power games and revenge. It doesn't work. It puts you in torment because people get what they want, but it's revenge. It's not this. Donald Trump, nobody's in agreement for him to tweet lies all the time and for him to take advantage of the situation of being president and put money in his own pockets. Okay, that might work in Africa, when you're selling people in, but you really can't make a lot of money when you decimate your people and you're the only one left with a bunch of money. That doesn't work. Okay, so what we're doing is we're taking this and we're saying everybody's in crisis. Everybody plays the games. Everybody puts people down. So how many people have been putting down Donald Trump? It's just constant. At first it was, funny, but then it's kind of like, oh, I don't want to listen to this anymore. It's just constant. And the reason for this is because people didn't want him to get away with this. Nobody was in agreement with him doing that. So now, but that the resistance associated with this is what happens if you're a Southern slave owner and that is the way you're making your money. You can't afford to pay 100 people to pick cotton. So then the solution is to come up with a way to clean the seeds out of the cotton bolls, and then that allows the people, you don't need so many people picking cotton, and then the machinery. So that in a way the Industrial Revolution helped to end that also because it made it financially possible to do that. Okay, so the exit strategy for Iraq, we're looking at the steps of the planning process, and that is to understand these principles, to understand the missing parts of it, the misunderstandings that led to this problem in the first place. And that is part of my books, the professional publishing books. But I'm an amateur, and my books are amateur quality books. I can only sell them to independent members. And right now, if they are afraid of being dragged into this hell of revenge, the genocide, if they're afraid of being enslaved by the people who are telling lies associated with the character defamation campaign against my organization, because we've got a mini genocide going on here. What happens now is that the information has to come out. It's like a competition. It's like all of this revenge going on. You can't get your life by getting revenge. I'm going to support this person instead of this person who's standing on the principles. We have to understand all of this information so that people can actually do a paradigm shift in their thinking and say, revenge doesn't work. It might work for Steven Seagal in a movie, or James Bond, or the thriller type stories, but it doesn't work in real life, because it always leads to this sense of torment. You don't get the life you want. You thought you were going to get it, and you didn't get it. Okay. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set up a court system. So then the next thing is, what about conflict resolution? The next step is, first of all, is understanding the information. Then the next step is conflict resolution. The people who are assuming responsibility are rising in power, and the people who are playing the power games are coming down in power. And when everybody's equal, that's when conflict resolution is possible. When the games stop working, you're losing power, like the United States did. But when we're rising in power is when we're assuming responsibility. Kind of like the person who ended up with a job as the next senator, in my past life issue. Okay, so then, but that doesn't solve any problems. Conflict resolution really doesn't solve the problems, because all it does is it's like a ceasefire, conflict resolution, and then it starts to build a sense of stopping the conflict. If revenge doesn't work, then what does work? And that is facing off with each other. We're going to face off, and we're going to stop this. We're going to come up with a plan that benefits everyone. Then the next step is mediation, and that's when both sides have their voices. But let's say that you have a whole bunch of people, let's say Donald Trump, and he's getting revenge on the Bidens, the Clintons, and the Obamas. Okay, Donald Trump, and then the Bidens, Clintons, and the Obamas. Okay, so let's say we have this grand lie being told by Donald Trump, and the Clintons and Bidens are everybody needs to have a voice. Mediation gives everybody a chance to have a voice. Okay, then the misunderstandings start to dissolve. It's a sense of respect starts coming out when people have their voice. They say, then nobody's perfect, and there are no victims and no villains at that point in time. Because when people have their voice, they start to realize that their voices needed to be heard, and they weren't having a voice. Okay, denying people a voice. Why would people lie to deny people a voice and to take money? Okay, how about the Republican Party working with Trump? They want a voice. They want to deny black people a voice, and then they want to control the economy and the power, line their own pockets, and they have to deny the voice at the same time. So you see, it's like, that's why it's taken so long for the Emancipation Proclamation to reach the people in Texas, because they had to figure out a way to cover their their proverbial rear ends on this. They didn't want to lose face, so to speak. They were also thought they had pride and they had capacity, but they have neither. They're getting revenge. Okay, so this is a very important thing to understand. And then the last thing was the court case. And it has to be not a kangaroo court, but a real court where people are able to have a real court case where both sides are equal, and then they can come back and be advocates of that. So now what we have here is the exit strategy for Iraq. The United States, after George Bush kind of moved out, after the main part stopped and they kind of took control, the main battle stopped, and they took control when Saddam Hussein was killed, hung, and I'll go into that in another book that I did. What happened was they set up a parliamentary system, and I was going, why would the United States set up a parliamentary system in Iraq when we believe in our Constitution? Why not just set up a constitution there? Why not enable Iraq to really thrive and do what they're doing? If we really are going in there, the parliamentary system allows for outside control. And the world's largest embassy in Iraq was, we're never going to leave. And when people say, we're never going to leave, that's kind of like slavery, isn't it? We're going to stay in here and we're never going to leave. We are going to keep control of your oil. That didn't work, did it? The idea of owning Iraq, we're going to take control of Iraq. To the victor go the spoils, right? We own Iraq now. That didn't work. Basically, they had to pull out of Iraq. And that's where it ended up now. But the conflict is not over because we are responsible. When going back to the very beginning, we're talking about universal law. We're talking about God's law, that what you do to somebody else will be done to you. And these 7 principles, equality, if you are coming down in power and the Iraqi people are coming up in power, conflict resolution. So it's time now where the Iraqi people, where the conflict can end because they're assuming responsibility for their own country. They have managed to do a great deal over the years, but it isn't enough. I introduced the idea of the Democratic Republic of Congo teaching them about how to set up a government after a genocide, and I have no idea if they ever took my advice. Nobody ever keeps me informed about anything. But basically what it is that once I sent the information out, then people can take it and they can use it, but they just can't steal the information because it's not enough. It won't carry them through. Creates a sense of cycles, like waves coming in and waves going out. This will work for a while, but then it stops working. And then, same thing happened with North Korea. Donald Trump went into North Korea, and they talked. But we don't know what they said. And then what happened was it was like a wave that went in and out. But the wave actually had an effect. Now Kim Jong-un is kind of like out. He's not so much barricaded himself anymore. He's going to have a dialogue with Joe Biden. And that is a real big thing that happened too, is his statement that he's going to have a dialogue, because that's equality. I'm equal to you. I am the dictator. I'm the leader of my country. Okay, I am the leader. I want peace. I want reunification with South Korea, and I want all of you to stay out. You are not welcome in our country. That's where we are. We do not want Russia to move into our country. The North Koreans do not want the United States or China or any other country, the six-party talks, stay out. I will make an agreement with South Korea, and they will make an agreement with us. We will provide security. You don't need to have U.S. troops in South Korea. And the people in South Korea, which is a very commercial enterprise kind of place, is saying, we have a market here. We have a whole country right next to us that speaks our language, and we can actually sell to them, and we can get rid of the United States, and all that land that is under U.S. bases is very valuable land because they're not making land anymore. You see, it's kind of like the first wave came in, and now it's time for us to start withdrawing troops and to allow the war to end in North Korea. But first of all, people have to get rid of revenge. We have to go step by step and understand all these principles that got us all mixed up and messed up, and they don't work anymore. So revenge doesn't work. So this is where we are right now, is the exit strategy for Iraq. And in our organization, there has been a character defamation campaign against us, but there's family genocides going on. There's the organization Genocide, Family Genocides, and we're going to start working with this protocol for ending genocides on every level. And then we'll get better, and then we'll go to England and Stonehenge and end the Iraq War. Okay? And I'll keep sharing information about it with you. Juneteenth, we're going to stop getting revenge against the black people. How about if we start thinking of them as the capable people that they are? And we're going to say this misunderstanding doesn't have to be there anymore. They're part of the economy. They're voters. They're people who are no different than us. They're rising in power as we are falling in power. It's time to be an inclusive culture, because that's what we are. We're a melting pot of cultures. We're a melting pot of religions. All the religions. Well, hey, I'll go into how to unify the world's 7 major religions in my next video. Okay? All right. So, happy Juneteenth. No matter what color you are or were in the past life issue, I wonder what I remember my past life issue where I was killed because I was a really good teacher and he didn't want to hear what I had to say. Okay, so now it's time to replay this again and to resolve all these issues. Revenge doesn't work. Okay, you do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That works really well. Universal law is the basis for the international court system that we're working to set up. So disputes between nations will be resolved in court rather than the battlefield. And then we don't have to wage war, which means all those troops can come back, and all the money from, well, not right away, but all the money that's being wasted on war will go to build infrastructure, like maybe, what can we do with cell phones? Can you come up with an alternative for a cell phone that powers it so we don't need rare earth minerals? Okay, the rare earth minerals, I'm going to tell you that the rare earth minerals are being mined all over the world. They're being taken out of the oceans and making global warming worse, because the oceans work as batteries. And when you remove the electrolytes out of a battery and continue to pour the energy of the sun into it, it gets hot. So it's making cell phones, and so let's look at that. If you're into technology, let's look at that. Come up with better ideas than new weapon systems. Okay, we'll talk about duality later. Okay, thanks for sharing. Like, share, and subscribe. And thanks for listening, for giving me a voice.